Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke with Global Chamber. Really excited about this program. This is the first time that we've done this at Global Chamber. And so this, I think, will be the first of hundreds because, as you know, Global Chamber has 525 metros around the world. So if we were going to talk about every single one of them, it would take a while. So when you think about 5, and divide 5 into 525, that's also a pretty big number. It just about covers doing this program every week for 2 years and then cycling back again. So we haven't figured out exactly the frequency and how we'll do it and how we'll structure it in the future. But I know today that we've got 5 cities, 6 experts about those cities that are going to take us there, and they're going to talk about a few things. They're going to talk about their metro. They're going to talk about some business opportunities that are there in their city. They're going to talk about any key cultural lifestyle issues that we should be aware of as we enter. There's a couple cities here, for instance, that I've never been to. So I'd love to learn more about what not to do and what to do in terms of doing business. And then finally, any other important points. Given that we've got 5 metro areas, we want to do that conversation in about 30 minutes so that we have 20 or 25 minutes at the end for your questions. And so if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat area and you'll have an opportunity later on to be able to ask those. Let's start. And so Eva Mróz, she's going to be telling us a little bit about Poland, and she's really perfect to tell us more with Memo Consulting. Eva helps companies land in Poland. She's based in Warsaw, and so who's better to tell us about, what we should be thinking about relative to current opportunities, and then how can we be successful there? Clearly, for all of these, we're not going to understand everything there is to know about these topics. However, you're now going to be connected to the top person in each one of these cities to be able to be connected to for future reference. So Eva, thank you so much for being a member of Global Chamber, for all of the things that you do, and for sharing your knowledge and expertise today about one of my favorite cities, Warsaw, Poland, very close to my own Brunke family hometown. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. It's my pleasure and honor to be here today and present in front of you. I've been a member of the Global Chamber for a while now, and I just when I saw Doug today, I had to apologize and excuse myself for not having been too active recently. But I will not waste my 5 minutes talking about things other than the topic of this meeting. And let me present to you something that I know from my own experience, namely how to do business in Poland. Just a second, I will switch on the slide presentation. Can you see my screen, please?
We can, absolutely.
Okay, great, fantastic.
Looks good.
So I'm not sure if Doug is going to kill me for that, but actually I will not focus only on Warsaw, and I will explain why. I understand that we are meeting today with business people from all over the world, with business service providers, with small, medium, or even big enterprises representatives. So I understand that you people may have a very broad spectrum of interest. From the local perspective, the Warsaw Metro region seems to be a little bit too little for your global perspective and for the perspective of the Global Chamber. So please let me speak a little bit broader, not only about Warsaw itself, although 99% of the information that I will present, of course, applies to Warsaw Metro area. But I wanted to point to the fact that outside of Warsaw, Poland has got very interesting locations for your businesses, and some of them may seem more attractive, more interesting, depending on what you seek after, what your needs are, because maybe you will need a place that is less expensive, maybe you will need accessibility to some resources. So I will try to be very brief and nicely present basic facts about Poland, about Warsaw, of course, as well. So first of all, as you, I assume, are located all over the world, let me say some very basic things. Please excuse me if it's too simple. But Poland, of course, is in Europe, in Central Eastern Europe. It's the 6th country in Europe in terms of population and area. It's actually located in the heart of Europe. When you see this background of this slide, the red spot, this is Poland. It's actually very, very central in Europe, between Germany and Russia as the biggest neighbors, but also neighboring with several other countries. And from Poland, you have the central access to the almost 3 million consumer market in Central Eastern Europe. The domestic market of Poland is 38 million. Warsaw, the capital of Poland, is approximately 2.5 million people. So you guys coming from metros of 20 million understand now why I perceived Warsaw maybe a little bit too little for the global perspective. But let's go on. Poland has got its own currency, it's Polish zloty. Although we are part of the European Union, we haven't adopted euro currency yet, which has pros and cons. I will not dive into this subject now because we don't have time, but please mind that we are not in the Eurozone. What business seeks is always safety and predictability. Of course, military, political, social safety are the first criteria that business is checking, deciding whether they want to locate in a certain place or invest money in a certain place. So Poland is a member of the European Union, of NATO, which obviously gives a lot of incentives in scope of safety, rule of law, democracy, military safety, of course. But what's also important about Poland, which is one of the post-communist countries in Central Eastern Europe, is that we have a relatively stable and resilient economy that haven't been prone to dramatic crisis happened in the world back in 2008 and also now in the time of the coronavirus crisis. So this shows that you know this economy is able to survive a lot of shaking. About regulatory policies, because obviously business needs predictability as far as regulations, legal regulations are concerned. This is more political. I will not dive deep here now, but because if anyone is interested in more details, I'll be happy to explain after the session or later in the Q&A session. But, you know, if not for the relatively stable regulatory system, we wouldn't have so many FDI, and I will tell you a little bit more a little later.
Okay.
For those who love...
I'm sorry, you have about a minute.
Okay, so I have to be very quick. For those who love numbers, you can see that our GDP is a little less than $7,000 per capita. The coronavirus crisis has caused some contraction as far as the economic growth is concerned. However, Poland is still doing quite well. Maybe one number I would like to pay your attention to, which shows the purchasing power of an average Polish household, is the the average disposable income per capita in Poland, the last point here on the screen, which is less than $20,000 compared to the US with, I guess, even now the over 50,000. I'm not sure if this number is from this or last year. I will skip the taxes. Labor market. This is one of the main strengths of Poland and the Warsaw metro area. Widespread English usage and the world-class engineers, including IT experts. Poland produces almost 40,000 IT and engineering graduates every year. We have low unemployment rate, and actually in some sectors we suffer shortages of labor force. As you may see down, the minimum wage or the average cost of labor is less than in Western Europe or in the US. FDI, Poland is one of the leaders in attracting foreign direct investors. Most of them are located in the Warsaw metro area, but not only. And of course, this is also one of the indicators that this country is a place to do business. Key sectors, business opportunities, generally manufacturing, different industries. However, motor vehicles, aerospace, and equipment are the leaders. Logistics, this is a huge topic now in Poland. Warehousing, e-commerce related logistics. The same about real estate. But what is specially or a specialty of Poland seems to be IT services and other knowledge-intensive services. Of course, now we are dealing with very intensified government investments. So whoever would be interested in hard stuff, hard infrastructure, road-related infrastructure, transportation hubs, it's a lot being done now and will be happening in the near future in Poland. Poland is not only business, it's also fun, pleasure, and tourism. So thank you for your attention, and I hope I will be able to answer some more questions later on. Thank you very much.
That's great. Would you be willing to send us this slide deck so that we can include it also if people are interested in learning more?
Absolutely, yes, sure. Thank you very much.
Great. So that'll allow you to send info to info@globalchamber.org or contact Ava directly. Feel free to do that as well. So our next speaker is in Manila. It's very late there for this particular Globinar, but Colin Christie is a resilient young man who is an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, originally a chemical engineer, and somehow he's persevered and become very successful in business, and not just knowledgeable about Manila, but a lover of the Philippines and the food and the business and the interactions there. So Colin, thank you for taking the time late in the evening. Thanks for all that you do. And tell us a little bit more about what we should know about Manila, Philippines.
Sure, thanks, Doug. Thanks for including me. And just to segue, I'll just say to Ava, I can firsthand attest to the IT skills in Poland because I just worked in the last couple of years on a big project collaboration with Polish developers in Poland. It was fabulous. But I'm going to talk to you about the Philippines. So and Metro Manila, and similar to what Ava did, I'll just give you quick broad strokes about the Philippines and Manila in general. You can see we're ranked 32 in GDP. But the GDP per capita is quite small because we have a large population, over 100 million people. Of course, Metro Manila is the capital city, but you can see that trade is a very, very big part of the economy here. In fact, in 2019, trade was 68% of external trade was 68% of our GDP. So highly dependent on international trade. So very relevant, I think, for Global Chamber. The local currency is the peso. So you can see that we rank around 30 to 40 in both merchandise trade and commercial services trade. As you probably already know, the two major trade sectors in the Philippines are outsourced services, right? So we're sort of the call center capital of the world. Probably most of you, if you're in the US especially, and you've called for customer service or called your airline or your bank, very likely you've been speaking to someone, around the corner from me. And so that's well known, but we're also very big in electronics. In fact, the semiconductor sector here is about a $35 to $40 billion a year trade sector, whereas the outsourcing sector is about 25 to 30 billion. As I already mentioned, the population is 110 million, but one thing that characterizes us very similar to many developing countries around the world is a very young population. You can see median age is only 25 years old. And in fact, I read the other day that 1/3 of our population is under 14. So everything's oriented around youth and education, and the startup scene is super hot right now and thriving because you got so many of these young folks who are starting businesses, and especially been even more so because of the pandemic, right? Everybody's had to be creative. It's a Christian country. 92% of the population are Christian or Catholic. So of course that's quite different to the rest of Asia. This is because obviously the Spanish influence, Spanish occupied the Philippines for several hundred years. So and we have two official languages, both the local, the Filipino language, largely Tagalog, but also English. So it turns out most media, all of business is primarily conducted in English. So that, of course, accounts for the large services trade and back office trade here because of the ease of English-speaking countries dealing with the Philippines. And actually, the US is the major trading partner with the Philippines. You can see on the chart here on the left, in terms of exports, over 15% of our exports is with the US, with Japan, China, following, of course, Hong Kong, Singapore. So besides our neighbors of Japan, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, the US is the next major. There's a fair amount of trade with Europe as well in terms of export. And this is largely, again, because of the services sector. In terms of imports, most of the goods that you're buying off the shelves here are coming from China, probably not too different to the US. So many of your goods there on the shelves are also coming from China, and the same thing here in terms of merchandise. I just have two areas to focus on before I wrap up. One is, what are the opportunities here? And I just identified two things besides what I already mentioned in terms of electronics and services. And the first is infrastructure. So there's massive infrastructure building here, massive modernization happening all around the country. Roads, bridges, airports, highways, water systems, electric, energy systems, et cetera. So anyone who's in the infrastructure business, or maybe consultants or technology providing to the infrastructure business, there's a huge opportunity here with a $25 billion fund earmarked for infrastructure building. And then the second one is Fintech. Much like a lot of developing countries around the world, banking, the population has been largely unbanked, with less than just 1 or 2% of the population even having a bank account. But this has changed radically, and especially, of course, because of the COVID era now, where everyone has to transact online, and Fintech has just taken off like crazy. So you can see here on this map, I know it's probably a little bit small. I can share also, Doug, the slides. There are 197 companies associated with the Fintech ecosystem here, everything from payment companies to e-wallets, to remittance, to credit scoring, blockchain, big data, AI, lending, et cetera. So if you're a digital type of business and somehow you tie into the Fintech ecosystem, there's a huge opportunity. I think, yes, I think that's mostly it. You can contact me at the email shown here, or let's connect also on LinkedIn, and more than happy to have a conversation with anyone who would like more details. So this kind of gives you the quick, brief overview of what it's like here.
Perfect. One of the things that we learned from Colin recently as well is that we do a virtual dining event, and I think it's been probably 2 or 3 months, but Colin was the host for the one on Philippine cuisine, and you might find it on social media. But Colin was just in his element, giving us all sorts of aspects of the food and the culture of the Philippines. So he's also an expert in those areas as well.
Okay, I admit it. I like to eat.
What is it about chemical engineering that brings out this in people? I don't know. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great information. Let's now go to Tallinn, Estonia with Sergei Žunajev. And so please pronounce your name correctly. I probably did not do that justice. He's business development on e-residency at the Republic of Estonia. And one of the really fascinating things about Estonia is their attraction of foreign workers to be able to have an e-residency, and they've made it simpler. Also, the cost of setting up a business in Estonia has reduced dramatically. And so, Sergei, looking forward to learning more about your perspectives on what the opportunities are there, and anything else you'd like to share.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, first of all, I gotta admit that it's quite a challenge for me to talk about Tallinn as a major metropolitan area, because Tallinn is only 500,000 population, so it's a super small town. And the country, Estonia, overall is 1.3 million. So this is it's much smaller than the cities presented here today, you know. So it's hard for me to separate it as well. And then, you know, most of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, it's kind of projected on the whole Estonia. But you know, the whole thing is happening in Tallinn anyways. You can literally drive through Estonia in 3 hours. So that's how small it is. But nevertheless, Estonia and its capital, Tallinn, they have grown to become so-called Silicon Valley of Europe. Due to its highly digitalized living environment. So when Estonia regained independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, then government invested heavily in the introduction of information technology, with Tallinn being its test bed for all the innovations. So today, over 100 public services are available for use online. Like, for example, you can file your taxes, do banking, you can sign documents, you can vote in elections, you can get a prescription from your doctor over the internet. So it's all digitalized nowadays. And Estonia and its capital Tallinn are leading in several worldwide rankings as well in the fields of ICT and cybersecurity, and is also ranked #1 worldwide in the area of entrepreneurial activity. So, for example, in Estonia, establishing a company takes only around half an hour, and basically from starting a company to filling annual reports, you can do everything without leaving your couch. And that's why Estonia, I believe, is among the countries hosting the highest concentration of startups per capita as well. Like, for example, Tallinn is a hometown for such unicorns like Skype, probably everybody knows. Maybe some of you know Bolt, TransferWise, which is Wise nowadays, and several others as well. And declaring your taxes, for example, is incredibly easy. In Estonia, 96% of all income tax declarations are filed online. And for average entrepreneur with basic knowledge in accounting, it takes around 50 hours per year to file and pay taxes. I also included the link from for the World Bank there. So if you want to compare with other countries in the world, then you can actually do it as well. It's pretty fun to go through it. And I would definitely want to mention a few words about the E-Residency Program that we started it back in 2014. And the E-Residency is basically a government-issued digital ID for non-residents that allows a person to establish a European Union-based company and run it completely remotely from any part of the world. And therefore have an access to all the Estonian digital ecosystem and all the e-government services as well that I was mentioning before. And we have more than 85,000 e-residents now as of today from more than 170 countries. And in 2021, nearly 1/5 of all the companies that were registered in Estonia, 1/5 of them was registered by e-residents as well. So it's a pretty huge thing for us as well. So if you would want to research it more, then you can just do it by the link right there. I added it on the top of the presentation. And honestly, this is pretty much it. I guess there's a lot of things to talk about Estonia and running business in it, but I wanted to focus specifically on this digital part of it because this is what we are really proud of. So I would be glad to answer more questions if you have any.
Fantastic. Great information. There's Sergei's email address. He's left you with some web addresses as well. Amazing what the country has done even before the pandemic. 2014, you mentioned about the e-residency starting. So congratulations on the progress, and hopefully that opens up the eyes of many in the audience and also other countries. It would be good to have a program like that in other countries. Estonia is on the cutting edge, no question. So thank you. Our next speaker will be Daniel Zaretsky. He's a global advisor for Global Chamber in 3 countries, Uzbekistan being one of them, where Tashkent is. He's the head of international relations at Adjacent Possibilities, and he's an independent consultant, and he's had a career in that region and is a particularly knowledgeable person around Uzbekistan and Tashkent. And so we're really pleased, Daniel, for you to share more today about what we should know. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. My printer is not working. Things are not working. So I have my notes up here, but you can see me and hear me while I read a little bit from my notes. Yes, all of you can see me and hear me. I just want to check. Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. Well,
yep.
First of all, I'm so there's no confusion. I'm from New York, and I'm home in New York right now because of the pandemic. And here you can see, my hat's from Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Xinjiang in Western China. So that just there. And like you, Doug, I grew up hearing Polish in my home. So my mother's from Poland originally too. So I mean, Eva, I think, Doug, you said you knew that. Anyway, let me get to it. So I've worked over the years in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, the capital of Kyrgyzstan, Dushanbe, capital of Tajikistan, and in and with Tashkent, capital of Uzbekistan. I'm currently home in New York. I was concentrating on Tashkent specifically when I got in touch with Doug, but if you put a gun to my head, where I'm going to end up next year, I would guess I'm probably winding up back in Dushanbe in Tajikistan, but I could have been any one of these places based on some of the projects that may be happening. So I'll cover Tashkent and a little bit broader Central Asia for you. Why to be interested? Well, if you take just the 5 stands, I'm talking Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, that population, which a lot of people don't realize, is about 80 million people. And it's growing. It's really growing because most of these countries have doubled their populations in the last 10 or 20 years. And the way they're having babies, they're going to be doubling again. So this population is going to be 100 before you turn around. Okay, so it has a huge youth bulge, and that's something I want to be clear. It has a huge youth bulge, and it shows no signs of ending this youth bulge. I'll get back to that in a second. I didn't prepare any slides, but the region is surrounded by Russia, by China on the east, by Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India down in the south, Iran, Turkey, and so on. Tashkent is the 4th largest city by population in the former Soviet Union. People don't realize that. That's after Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Kiev. But it only recently opened up. The new president took over 4 years ago, and that's when things started to open up. So it's behind Almaty, which was the old capital of Kazakhstan, which is still the business center of the region, and which opened up 30 years ago. And I will just say, though, that the kind of second home for everybody who works in the region is Istanbul Airport. So before the pandemic, Turkish Airlines flew to 125 countries, and they are the main flyer to Central Asia. Uzbekistan Airways does have a direct flight from JFK to Tashkent, which is about 12 hours, but from Istanbul, it's about 5 hours. New Delhi is about 3 hours by flight. Moscow is 4 hours. Urumqi, capital of Xinjiang, China, is about 2.5 hours. So one of the things that's key too is that before the opening up, the countries were all quite antagonistic to each other, but there's been a lot more regional cooperation now. Before the pandemic, there was even talk of a regional Silk Road tourism visa, because before you had to get visas for all the countries separately. And in fact, for Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, at least before the pandemic, they had even waived the visa for a certain number of days for most people. Let's go down here and see. Well, the countries are all very resource driven with oil and gas, gold, hydropower, this kind of stuff. The thing that Uzbekistan, and specifically Tashkent, is it's the only country that actually manufactures and makes things in the region. So it's not just pulling stuff out of the earth. In Kazakhstan or Turkmenistan, you're mainly going to do oil and gas. In a place like Kyrgyzstan or Tajikistan, something like gold. And there's loads of hydropower potential in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, but it's not being used. There's lots of electricity problems in all these countries. So one of the things you should know about is the cotton monoculture. So the Soviet Union enforced a cotton monoculture on the region, and this particularly hit Uzbekistan hard. You may have seen the drying up of the Aral Sea. So cotton is still a big issue. Uzbekistan finally got off the list of I don't know what the exact list, but boycotting cotton because they use, because of the conditions for the cotton pickers. They were assessed to have moved beyond that and now meeting certain standards. But that's an issue. But in theory, the agricultural lands are very rich, especially in the Fergana Valley, which is a heavily densely populated area that is partly in Kyrgyzstan, partly in Tajikistan, partly in Uzbekistan. Stalin divided up the borders in crazy ways there. Tashkent is at the kind of the meeting place of a bunch of different rail lines and roads, and they're really looking to make Tashkent a logistics hub there. The Chinese are heavily involved in the economies of these countries, as you can imagine, and there's a bunch of special economic zones in the country. Renewable energy is something that is a possibility. I think Uzbekistan gets 310 days of sun a year. So just so you know, a good portion of this region is desert, a good portion is mountains. And if you go up to north to Kazakhstan, you'll get flat steppe. Now, the other thing is there's going to be a lot of privatization, there already is, of state-owned enterprises. So Uzbekistan, unlike Kazakhstan, did not do a lot of reforms in the 90s and the zeros, and now they're starting to do that. So there's a lot of privatizations coming up. And I should mention real estate and tourism. Tourism is a huge moneymaker for this region. For Kyrgyzstan, Isykyl is a lake in Kyrgyzstan, a big tourism destination. But in Uzbekistan, you've got the old Silk Road cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, and Khiva. So that I think I'll be 2 more minutes on this presentation, by the way.
Okay,
so
you've got a little bit less than that, but yeah,
okay,
please go ahead.
Just tell you. So look, huge tourism, huge. I mean, making tons of money. Tajikistan too, our work, making the mountaineering and going to the Pamir region, mountains and all this kind of stuff. So this has been heavily hit. So it'll be interesting to see what will happen. But there was a huge need for hotels and tourism facilities in this region, and especially in Uzbekistan. Tashkent only recently, in the last 5 years, opened up its Hyatt and its Hilton, and there was a big possibility for more hotels. What's happening with COVID now, we'll have to see how it affects everything there. I should mention that the population, many of them work in Russia and send remittances home, millions. So that's another thing that's been affected by COVID. One other thing I wanted to, the last thing I'll just talk about is a unique Soviet Muslim culture. These are Muslim countries, but they were under the Soviet Union. So they were forced to do a lot of things, like women were forced to burn their veils in public in the 20s and out of the house, and all kinds of things. So it's a Muslim culture. They've returned somewhat to Islam since the Soviet Union fell apart, but it's a very different Muslim culture in some ways from what you might see in other parts of the Muslim world, and so on. And I should mention, though, that it's very safe. I feel very safe in the region. I've never felt in danger in all these years. The last thing is about the languages. Russian is still language, the key language. If you're going to do international business, if you're going to do work with the government, things are still done in Russian that way, and still going to be for another 20, 30 years till the Soviet generation moves on. 30 seconds, Doug. Now, what's happening there? English is certainly increasing. When I started in the 90s, nobody spoke English, so the young people are speaking English more and more. But the people will generally use their own languages when talking to each other. What are those? And that's my last point. Tajik of Tajikistan is basically very similar to Dari of Afghanistan and Persian of Iran. These people can generally mutually understand each other. The rest of the languages are all Turkic languages, and the Turkic language belt will stretch from Turkey all the way into Russian Siberia, and even into Western China, and so on. But English and Russian will probably get you by pretty well, and you can probably, find an interpreter and get by with English pretty well if you're doing business at this point. So I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat at the end here, and you can reach out to me, and hopefully by the last part of this year, I will know where I'm going to be and what project or projects I'll be working on again. So thank you very much.
Undoubtedly in the region. Amazing information, and all of the presentations so far just been extraordinary in terms of the content that you've shared. So thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it. Our last presenters, and then we'll get to Q&A, are Sue Rogers and Stephen Heel. They work for Cresa. So if you're a company that's looking to come into the US, or you're a US company looking to grow internationally, Cresa supports that activity no matter where you're working in the world. We've been just so impressed over the years on Cresa's ability to be connected to the world and international companies. Sue and Stephen are based in Houston, and they're going to talk a little bit more about the Houston area, but they can provide information about really any area. So thank you for both being here. You're both employees and folks who are strong advocates for Cresa, and as we are in terms of the tenant focus that you take. So congratulations on your success, and we look forward to learning more about Houston.
Thank you, Doug. That's a really nice introduction. So Texas, as most of you may or actually may not know, is located in the Sun Belt of the United States, and the Sun Belt is an extremely popular place for companies relocating. For several reasons, they're locating to Texas, and Texas is the world's 9th largest economy. We've had incredible job growth here. We have an incredible workforce that based on our industry size, it makes it just a powerful economy here in Texas. Texas fosters an extremely friendly environment. We have no corporate taxes, and we have no personal income taxes. So Texas actually offers one of the lowest tax burdens in the country. And a lot of companies are relocating to Houston and to Texas from other states. We see a lot of influx We've seen more influx in the last couple of years than we have in quite some time. The population in Houston, in the metro areas, 7 million people, and in the Houston city itself, it's 2.5 million, just to give you an idea of what the size is. We have a diverse and highly skilled workforce, extremely easy access to global markets because of our robust infrastructure, very predictable regulations, which allow businesses to prosper here.
So I think a lot of people know Houston for its oil and gas and NASA. I don't think what they might not know is that Houston ranks second in manufacturing in the U.S. And it has a diversity in that as well. For instance, one of the largest air conditioning companies just built a 4 million square foot facility here, and that Igloo builds coolers. So these are the things that people don't know about. Also, the largest medical center in the world is actually based in Houston. And also, they just broke ground on a 1 million square foot bio research campus. So these are things that there are business opportunities that people might be aware of in this area.
As well as digital technology, which there are more than 8,200 tech-related companies in Houston, and that's also a growing industry here.
Well, and then tech has been, we've been seeing a movement from California somewhat to Texas. I think a lot of people know Austin, Tesla and Oracle just moved their headquarters. HP just moved its headquarters to the outskirts of Houston. So there is a movement there. Houston's actually opened a new tech hub. We're probably a little behind Austin on that, but moving in that direction very quickly.
Houston is the 4th largest city in the United States and has a very diverse and fast-growing population. We're actually ranked #1 as one of the most diverse cities in the United States, which I think few people really understand just how diverse Houston is. 90 consular offices are located here.
Yeah, it's a very international city. And for Texas, it's probably the most international city in Texas. I don't think people realize that either. Austin and Dallas have their, and San Antonio have their niches, but there's no doubt Houston's more international than any of those.
145 languages are spoken here. So that gives you some idea of how diverse Houston is.
Another area that I don't think everyone's aware of is Houston actually has the largest water tonnage port in the US. I think people think don't think of Houston, don't think of a port necessarily, but it is one of the biggest ports in the country and one of the biggest in the world, actually. And then we have all the, we have two major airports, both international, so access is easy, and interstate connections are all set up very well.
Another big attraction to Houston for many corporations that are relocating here and are looking to Texas as to a new place to expand their business is the quality of life. We have the 2nd lowest cost of living in 20 of the largest US MSAs. And we have the most parkland of the 10 largest US cities. I don't think people understand Houston as a green city, but you can see that picture. That's a fairly typical park here in Houston, and we have many, many parks. And as far as you foodies, there in Manila, we're routinely ranked among one of the best food cities in the United States. And we're fast becoming one of the top locations for millennials to relocate.
Yeah, I think the Parkland one is one that shocks a lot of people. They see Houston and see freeways, which there are a lot of freeways. and they need them. And we're 60 miles across, so you need that. But it's amazing how much parkland there is. It's surprising. You have to get off the freeways. That's the whole deal.
But the food is a big deal here, without any question. And again, I think it points to our diversity. And we have so many different types of restaurants and lots of fine arts and lots of sports. So you can get everything you want in Houston as far as extracurricular activities.
Yeah, and they actually have the ballet, the opera. It's actually got the most established arts groups outside of New York. That's not something very common.
We talked a little bit about this the last time I was on a webinar, and I think one of the most attractive things in Houston right now is just how available office and industrial space are. We have 153 million square feet of Class A office space, 124 million square feet of Class B, and our vacancy rate right now is 24%. Once we hit a 20% vacancy rate is when landlords become extremely competitive, and we're seeing that now without any question. The office market here is an extremely competitive one, offering lots of incentives and again, attracting people from all over the world as well as the United States.
Great place to be a tenant in the market.
The industrial picture is a little bit different. While we have quite a lot of industrial space, I think a lot of this based on the petrochem industry and the energy industry, even with oil prices hitting a slump, which they are not in right now, the vacancy rates in industrial space have been very low, but there's a lot of new construction, and it's all focused on logistics and delivering items from companies like Amazon and the air conditioning. What is the air conditioning company?
Dakin.
Yeah, Dakin. So we're having to build industrial space to meet the needs of people coming into the city for those reasons. But it's a really extremely active market.
I would finish by just saying I mean, for those who've done business in Texas, they know it's an easy place to do business. It's probably one of the easiest places to set up a business and operate a business with some of the lowest tax rates in the country.
Yeah, I think the tax rates always kind of stand out as one of the main features here.
And it's been in high growth mode for quite a long time, even during the last, we're coming out of it faster than a lot of the other states. So it's a good opportunity for anyone who wants to come in. We're happy to discuss. Thank you.
What an amazing story, and I personally started my career in Beaumont, Texas, 84 miles east of Houston. And I remember those days that's so oil-based, chemical industry-based, and so cyclical. And so you've talked about a community now that's much more diverse, much from a global perspective, but also from a manufacturing and industrial and market factors. So that creates a better place to live. And so thank you for sharing all of that. We have several questions in the chat area. We have only about 10 minutes, so we have to move fairly quickly. So I just ask for fairly quick responses to these, and let's see how far we can get. I'd love to kind of go get a response to each of these from each of you, maybe starting with Eva. I'll do a dual question. We'll combine two of the questions into one. First of all, how did you get to Poland, Warsaw? Some of you are from different places, so I'd love to hear more about that piece. And then in the next 5 years, what will be the surprise? What industry or what area of growth in the area will likely be a surprise to many people? So Eva, would you like to start, please? How did you get there, and what's going to be the surprise within 5 years in terms of a market segment that's going to surprise everybody?
Doug, I'm not sure if I heard the first part of your question, because I understand there are two parts. So the surprise is clear. And what was the first part?
How did you get to Warsaw?
Love. This was a very good reason. Now, actually, my whole family has lived in Warsaw for decades, and I come from the south of Poland. But it's true that some years ago, I fell in love with a person who lived in Warsaw. So I started to live in Warsaw as well. And since then,
and now you love Warsaw.
It's interesting. It's getting nicer and nicer and more interesting. Actually, I never was a Warsaw fan, but now Warsaw is developing so quickly. There is so much new things going on here, and very nice modern facilities, very, very interesting investments concerning making the city modern, making it digital oriented, business oriented for young people. So Warsaw is getting nicer and nicer. If you were here 5 years ago, you have to come back because it's a totally different city now. So it's changing really quickly. But the second part of the question, the biggest surprise, I hope the biggest surprise will not be another pandemic or something that will stop the world as it did a year and a half ago. So this is something that the normal ongoing growth and development will be the nicest surprise and something that we are all waiting for. And I hope that the recovery for industries that suffered most from the lockdowns during the pandemic will not last long, and that soon it will all be over. Honestly, the biggest surprise, I think this going one way. Digitalization, fintechs, what Sergei was telling us about Estonia. Poland is very similar to that as far as being more and more digitalized. I don't remember when I last went to the bank, went to some administration office, to government, where I do everything through internet, like most of the Poles do. So I think this is the one-way road.
Okay, very good. Thank you for sharing. Colin, you are from South Africa. So some way you, and I know you're a Philippine file, you ended up in the Philippines. Tell us more about that. And then what's going to be the big surprise over the next 5 years?
Yeah, so my association, not just with the Philippines, but Asia, goes way back to childhood. As you mentioned, I was born in Johannesburg, but the young age, we moved to Hong Kong, and I was raised in Hong Kong. And so later on, when I went to the US to study and work, of course, I maintained the Asia connection, and I spent the first part of my career in semiconductor manufacturing. So we did our manufacturing, part of our manufacturing here in the Philippines. So way back, my association is with the Philippines, and I've lived here pretty much full time for many years. So what's surprising? I think similar to the previous answer, it's how fast digital transformation is happening here, because we were really laggards for a long time. In fact, Global Chamber in Manila put on one of the first digital transformation summits, and it was only in 2017. And people were saying, what's digital transformation, in 2017? And now, as I showed on my slide, we have hundreds of digital companies, and not just in fintech, but health tech, and in banking, insurance, et cetera, as well. So yeah, just the rate, and also I think it has to do with the fact that we have such a young population. Philippines is number 1 users of Facebook, for example. The average time spent on Facebook in the Philippines is double that in the US. And so everyone has 1 or 2 smartphones. And so as soon as the digital services became available in the last couple of years, the uptake was very rapid. And I think that's going to continue.
Okay, thank you very much. Sergei, your LinkedIn profile is a little nebulous on where you might be from, and I've seen you, it looks like you've worked for different countries. Tell us, how did you end up there? And what's going to be the big surprise in terms of growth over the next 5 years, do you think, in Tallinn?
Well, my parents, they are immigrants from Russia, from Siberia. And I was born back in Soviet Union still, when Estonia was under the Soviet Union. So Estonia is my home country. So that's how I ended up there.
Fantastic.
Yeah. The biggest areas, I think worldwide, biotech, definitely, and artificial intelligence, definitely. Those are the big growth areas. As for Estonia specifically, I don't think we're big on biotech, but artificial, well, maybe not even that. I would say all the technology oriented things, technology development, ICT, and probably something that's connected with autonomous vehicles and LiDAR systems and things like these. This is I've recognized this was a hot topic in recent years.
Fantastic. Daniel, we know that Queens, New York is the most diverse county in the United States. I think you're from Queens and you've got a Polish mother, and the way you talked about all the stands and all the different areas around there, clearly you've spent a lot of time there, and beyond that, you love the region. So tell us more, how in the world did you get so involved with Uzbekistan and the rest of the region? And then what's going to be the big surprises over the next 5 years?
Got it. Well, I think life is an accident, because who would have guessed? So basically, I studied Latin in high school. And when I went to college, university, it was perestroika and glasnost. And I wanted something different from Latin. So I started with Russian, and I took an intensive class. So actually, by the end of my first year, I already had intermediate Russian speaking. And then I got into Central Asia because I went to write an honors thesis for my bachelor's just as the Soviet Union was collapsing, and my advisor was a China expert. So she said, you have Russia, I have China, write about what's in between. And I should mention that I did take a trip to the Soviet Union when it was the Soviet Union, to Tbilisi, Georgia, and to Russia as well. So once I got into Central Asia, it was a new area, and that's what I'm into, new areas, new opportunities. And so I thought that's my comparative advantage. No one knows about it. I have to get over there and so on. So I wound up working in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan in 94 and in 98. I worked in Tajikistan, most of the last 10 to 15 years. And also the other thing is the languages. So I speak advanced Russian, which thanks to Kyrgyzstan that happened. And I speak intermediate Persian, and I used to speak intermediate Turkic languages, but it's very rusty. But I love languages and culture and all that. Now, into the last thing about what would surprise you. Well, I'm not saying it's going to happen. What I would love to see, and I had my notes for this in the presentation, but we didn't have time. I mentioned the youth bulge. The two areas of the world that I see that have big youth bulges are Sub-Saharan Africa and the Muslim areas of the former Soviet Union, including, the Caucasus region of Russia. But I don't deal with that. I deal with Central Asia. I do not see that the youth, well, what I'm trying to say is 30 years ago, Central Asia was way ahead of Africa, and I feel Africa is long past Central Asia. I was involved, this will be one more minute. I was involved with developing the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Tajikistan. I've been to Africa. I'm struck in Africa by the youth, the energy, developing entrepreneurs, VCs, donors, business angels, mentors. I'm struck with all the energy coming up with solutions to their problems, and profitable and sustainable solutions and apps and so on. I'm hoping that we can use this youth bulge in Central Asia to do the same thing in the next 5 years and start to see a lot more in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, just like in Africa. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great summary. Sue and Stephen, how about you guys? Are you from Texas originally, from Houston? And what's going to be the big surprise over the next 5 years, do you think, in the region?
Well, I'm from the UK originally, so I was living in the UK, and I ended up here because I was sent in the UK and two friends, and we said we want to go and look at somewhere else. We toured around a lot of Europe. We flipped a coin between Australia and the US, and it landed on the US. And so I came here, toured around, and met a Texan girl.
Love again.
And the rest is history, as they say. I think biggest surprises 5 years from now for here would be the pivot of some of these energy companies into renewable energy. It's starting to happen. I think we're going to see that a bigger push there, that They are getting into it more, and they're going to be a big push for acquiring companies to get there, some of the larger ones. And then the other side would be biotech. I think there's a push here to be the third coast in biotech, and I think it can happen.
Sounds good. Sue?
I was raised on the East Coast outside of Philadelphia and came to Texas when I was 18 and basically have been here ever since. Fell in love with the area and met my husband, raised my kids here. So I'm pretty much a Houstonian at this point. I had in my mind what I was going to say as the big surprises, and they were the same actually as what Stephen, which I'm not surprised. But yeah, I think the renewable energy business is definitely going to move the needle on corporations here, as the major energy companies have to make a shift, and they're all pretty much committed to making that shift and changing the carbon footprint as we see it today. And I think this medical research and technology is just, because of the growth and development happening in the medical center right now, and we have one of the largest medical centers in the world, I think it's just going to explode. So that's what I would say.
Okay, that sounds great. We're just about at the end of the program. We're going to run a minute or two over, but I want to have one last question, because we didn't mostly touch on cultural issues, but I'd like to ask each of you just kind of a speed round. What's the major faux pas that people not from your region make? Like coming into Houston, as an example, are there either US folks or foreign folks that come in and they don't understand business, so they make this mistake? And do you have any other tips that you can provide? Maybe just a short summary.
Location. We're 60 miles across.
Yep.
There's a lot of areas, and you got to pick the right area for what your business type is.
Got
That's
it.
not from the obvious. I mean, if you want to be near the airport and port, but you need to. There's multiple submarkets. You got to pick the right area.
60 miles across, double the size of Singapore Island. So amazing. Any tips in terms of dealing with Houstonians?
They're friendly.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's really easy. Houstonians are known to be some of the friendliest people in the United States. So
you get help here.
Yeah, you get a lot of help, and yeah.
Even from people within your you compete in business.
Right.
To a degree.
Fantastic. Daniel, how about in Uzbekistan? What cultural mistake did they make, and any tip?
Well, I can give more from experience in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, but it broadly applies. I mean, don't just fly in there if you're coming in there and expect to necessarily get down to business right away. Now that may happen, but it may not, and you may be taken to a banquet. Doesn't matter how tired you are, and there may be a lot of food and a lot of vodka. There might be, there might not be, you're expected to eat the food, or they'll be offended that you don't like the food. And my advice on the vodka: don't even drink a little bit. Once you drink a little bit, it's over. You're going to be drinking and drinking. If they have vodka and if they drink, they may not. So you just come up with some excuse that that your doctor or this or that. Don't think you can just have a little. Once they see you had a little, it's over. So
Great advice. You've saved a few lives there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Sergei, how about Estonia?
I think there are a couple of things. One, what you can probably notice, they say a lot about Estonians, that we are really people that's hard to read. So we don't open our emotions a lot. So it's not typical to be super expressive. So with this American attitude, like Americans are very open-minded and very welcoming, and they're like, "Hey, how are you doing?" In Estonia, people will think like, "What the hell?" That's too much for me. You should be very conservative with Estonians. That's one thing. And another thing is just I guess all in all in Estonia, it's a pretty high percent of non-religious people. So it's not typical to go to church in Estonia. So maybe it's just good to know for somebody.
So as is normal around the world, don't bring up religion, and so that makes sense quite a bit. Colin, you've adjusted to the Philippines quite well. What faux pas do you see foreigners make in the Philippines, and any other advice?
Well, the good news is similar to what was said by others. The people here are very friendly, and they're very used to dealing. It's very international here, especially Metro Manila. So they're used to dealing with people from all over the world. So that's good. Actually, it's also a similar comment in that if you do want to be, more tuned into the culture, it's the same thing where you don't get down to business right away. So that, so again, get to know each other over a meal, or get to, just a little bit more personal discussion and whatnot, and then business can come a little bit later. Whereas, so I think, that helps. Not mandatory, but it helps.
That makes sense. Thank you. Finally, Eva, for Warsaw, what faux pas do you see often, and any other tips culturally?
Actually, I can hardly think of any clear faux pas that you can make here in Poland, because Poland seems to be more and more diverse. I would make the very rough division: old generation, younger generation. Maybe a faux pas would be if you met a man belonging to the older generation who suddenly starts to kiss your hand, as a woman, of course. And some foreign women are surprised. What is happening? Why is he kissing my hand? And what's going on? And this is just a Polish old tradition to greet women with courtesy. But obviously young men don't do that at all, and young generation is no longer going this way. But contrary to the US and Americans, politics and religion are no taboos in Poland. We talk about it very eagerly all the time, and so don't be surprised if you come to a meeting with Polish people and they jump on you and start asking you questions about your political views and what you think and how you vote and so on. So this is something that we discuss eagerly, and of course everybody is an expert in this area.
That's very funny. Are there wrong politics or wrong religions to be part of in Poland, or is there an acceptance of pretty much anything?
Of course, it depends on who you talk to, because everybody has got her own views and convictions. So absolutely, Poland is divided in half. So half is conservative, national, less open to being this, modern liberal, and the other half of Poles is the contrary of that, more like Western, modern society, liberal thinking. And actually, it's not always connected with the age. So young people can be in both groups, and the same about elderly. Of course, as a role, elderly people are more conservative. But the division seems to be very equal, like half-half.
Interesting. Okay, sounds like politics in Texas, which is probably a good way to bring this to a close. Thank you all. Really great information on the business side, doing business in each of one of your metro areas. Really appreciate you all being somewhat of a guinea pig in this process of the first one of these. And so we'll take what we've learned through this, and you'll be the initial trendsetters in terms of how we move forward. So thank you so much for your time and talent and experience. Those of you who are listening, watching either in person or more likely by video, because we'll have a blog post of this and we'll have this as a recording coming up in the next several weeks. Please feel free to contact any of the speakers. If you didn't get their contact information and you really need to get them, certainly try LinkedIn, but also send us an email at info@globalchamber.org, and we'll be happy to connect you. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, everybody, for today.
Thank you.
See you somewhere in the world.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, Colin.
Good night.
Hold on.